Hi everyone, right, welcome to tip of the day in the sewing world. Right, today I'm going to show you some darts. Many sewers will sew a dart. You'll probably get a little, what we call little titty at the end of the dart, or a little bubble, and that's because you've got to really stitch it right and taper it off to right to nothing. It's got to be tapered to zero. And depending on some fabrics will create a bit of a bubble, you know, it might stretch as you put in the darts in. I'm going to show you a foolproof way to get a beautiful finish on the end of the dart. There will be no bubble there at all. So I'm going to show you. Now I'm going to show you, I've got the two pieces. So I'm just going to sew one up for you now, and you'll see what I mean by having a little titty, the little bubble at the top, okay? Okay, so I'm just sewing this one up. And you can see some like a bubble, like what they call a titty there. This fabric's not too bad. You'll get some fabric that's really quite bad, and that's because you've got to really taper it, the stitch right to the end to a point. But some fabrics will create that tip. Of course, you do need some shape around to, like especially for a bust dart, it's got a shape over it. But sometimes, you know, if your dart stitching is not totally accurate, you can create this quite a big bubble and you can't shrink it out, okay? So I'm going to show you a foolproof way. See if you can see that little bubble there. I'll show you foolproof, that will just go, okay? Now, what you do, I'm just going to bring this camera back out for you. So here's my dart again, I'm going to stitch here. Now, the secret is you cut another piece of fabric out, about an inch. It's got to be longer. It's got to be longer, it doesn't really matter if an inch longer, 2 inch longer, that'll be trimmed off after. So it's got to be longer than where you're going to be stitching it to, okay? Okay, and the secret is, this is going to be placed under about halfway, and then so I'm going to show you. Now, I usually, before I go to the machine, you can actually, when you fold over the dart in the middle, give it a little tip. You can use your end of your sewing table. Pretend this is my sewing table here. Bring it here, and then you just get that, and you can just crease it, okay? And you'll get a nice little crease in the middle of your dart, okay? So that would be your sewing table, or you can just use your iron, okay? Or finger press it, it's up to you. Now, what you do is always, remember, you always go on the wider side of the dart, and it's going to be tapered off to nothing, okay? Right, let's just make sure. Now you get your piece, you've got to get your piece, a piece of little fabric that's the same weight. Now, on light medium weights, you use the same fabric, okay? So I'm using the same fabric. Now, if you've got a very heavyweight tweed, or, you know, quite a heavyweight, then you can't use the same fabric underneath. The reason why I use the same fabric underneath, you've got to balance the dart out. You'll see what I do in a minute after we've stitched it. You've got to balance the dart out. So it's got to be equal weight each side of the dart, okay? Now, if this was a tweed, you'd have to use some kind of lining. So this would be a lining, cut out, you know, strip that's about an inch wide or a little bit wider, it doesn't really matter, but as long as it's longer than the dart, okay? So on heavyweight fabrics you'd use a lining, but on most fabrics you use the same fabric, okay? Now, what we're going to do, I'm going to go to the machine, I'm going to place this underneath, okay? And then, so I'm going to place my dart halfway between this 1 inch fabric or something, and you see it's been placed roughly about halfway, and I'm going to stitch. And I'm going to stitch off. So follow your dart line, come up, and you stitch off onto the actual the extra fabric. Just get this out for you. So I'm going to stitch off the fabric onto the lining part, or the extra fabric, 1 inch fabric underneath. So that's going to continue. Okay. So just continue and just stitch and go onto the fabric. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do now. So I'm going to stitch this now. Okay. Yep. The dart, and then just run it off onto the fabric underneath. But place the dart halfway between that piece of fabric, okay? Roughly, approximately, okay? But you've got to make sure that fabric underneath is longer. So I'm going to do that for you now, and we'll get back to you. I'll get back to you once I've stitched it in. Okay, right, you can see. So I've stitched the dart, I've stitched right in it, and I've come off onto the actual the little piece of fabric underneath, about halfway. I've come off, okay, and it's stitched underneath. You can see the stitch lining, so it's gone off. Okay, now what I'm going to do, just I always press stitching, because some stitching can be a bit tight, okay? Then what I'm going to do now, I'm going to trim off this that fabric underneath. Can you see? So I'm just going to trim all that off underneath. We don't need all that now. So we'll actually trim it right back to the dart. Okay. And then what we'll do, we'll open it up. And now the fabric, that's going to go back on itself, okay? Remember that little piece of fabric on? So that's going to go back on itself. You can see the fabric will just fold back on itself, and then you're just going to open that dart up, okay? Hopefully you can all see this, okay? That's just going to open up. Let's quickly iron that out for you. And just open that dart back on itself, okay? So there we have it. So the dart will fold one side and that fabric will fold on the other. Hopefully you can see that, okay? Just press that now. And I'm just going to go to the other side, and there we go. Hey presto. So it will just, there we go. There's no bubble at all. Can you see that? Just so clean. And that's how it should be. So if you compare the little titty here, can you see? And that's totally flat. And I do that with all of my jackets, my chest darts. I'll do it with my trousers, the darts on the front, and I'll do it with my women's stuff as well. And you'll never go wrong. You'll get a lovely clean edge of the dart right at the top, okay? All right, you get a lovely clean edge. So I had one of the members here, Emma, I think you're right, Emma from Canada. She asked me a question about, she had a problem with her bust dart, and there was a problem, she'd actually misaligned the waist dart, and I seen it, but also there was a big titty, a big bubble at the end of the dart, and so I've shown her this way, so to correct that problem of that big bubble you'll get at some of your darts at the end, okay? So hopefully that's helped you, and yeah, I look forward to seeing you on my next little short tutorial. Ciao for now.